Before watching this video, take a moment to consider what would make an entire village of experienced Arctic survivors abandon their homes in the dead of winter without taking essential supplies? What force could be powerful enough to make 2,000 people leave without creating a single footprint? Keep these questions in mind as we examine the evidence from the Anjikuni village disappearance, a case so strange that after 9 decades of investigation, we still cannot explain what happened on that November night in 1930.
What would drive you to abandon your home, leaving food on the fire, in the middle of a Canadian winter where temperatures plunged to 40 degrees? This question haunted Joe LaBelle as he made his treacherous journey through the snow-laden wilderness of Nunavut in November 1930. LaBelle, an experienced trapper familiar with the brutal conditions of the Arctic, was no stranger to isolation. But nothing prepared him for what he would encounter at Anjikuni Lake. The village stood silent against the unforgiving landscape. As LaBelle approached, he noticed smoke still rising from several fires, but not a single voice called out in greeting. The eerie stillness was punctuated only by the crackle of burning wood. Inside the dwellings, he reported finding meals half consumed, as if the residents had suddenly fled in the middle of eating. Along the shoreline, kayaks remained perfectly aligned, vital transportation, abandoned by people who relied on them for survival. Inuit settlements in 1930s Nunavut weren't merely places to live. They represented generations of adaptation to one of Earth's most hostile environments. These communities maintained deep spiritual connections to their ancestral lands and developed sophisticated survival techniques passed down through centuries. For them to leave behind essential equipment, clothing, hunting tools, food stores, was not merely unusual. It represented certain death in a region where survival demanded meticulous preparation. The story first reached the public through Emmett Kelleher's article in the November 27, 1930 edition of the Danville Bee. This initial account chronicled LaBelle's discovery and his subsequent report to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. With each retelling, the narrative grew more elaborate. Soon, reports emerged of frozen sled dogs discovered in the surrounding area, their bodies inexplicably untouched by scavengers. Most chilling were claims about the village's small burial ground. Graves allegedly disturbed from within, bodies mysteriously absent. As the temperature drops in the Arctic, the night sky often dances with the ethereal glow of the aurora borealis. But according to later versions of the story, witnesses reported unusual lights hovering over Anjikuni around the time of the disappearance, lights that moved with purpose rather than the familiar patterns of the northern lights. However, an internal report filed by Sergeant J. Nelson in January 1931 cast significant doubt on many elements of the tale. Nelson's investigation found no foundation for claims of burning fires and half-eaten meals. The sensational details that captured public imagination appeared to be embellishments added by journalists seeking to transform a possibly mundane abandonment into a chilling mystery. Despite Sergeant Nelson's skepticism, the Anjikuni mystery was about to undergo a fascinating metamorphosis. Like a whispered tale around a campfire, the story escaped the confines of factual reporting and entered the realm of legend, growing more elaborate
and supernatural with each retelling. What mysterious alchemy transforms a simple abandoned settlement into one of history's most persistent enigmas? The transformation began with Armand Laurent, a trapper who reported witnessing something extraordinary, a cylindrical object hovering in the sky near the empty village. This single account injected a supernatural element into what might have been a mundane case of village abandonment. With this new text, the mysterious blue glow that reportedly illuminated the Arctic sky that night acquired an otherworldly significance, despite its likely explanation as the aurora borealis appearing unusually concentrated under specific atmospheric conditions. By 1959, the Anjikuni disappearance had found its way into Frank Edwards' influential book Stranger Than Science, cementing its place in paranormal literature. Edwards' work proved pivotal, reframing the event within the subtext of unexplained phenomena and elevating it from newspaper curiosity to supernatural mystery. As the story spread through subsequent publications like The World's Greatest UFO Mysteries, new elements materialized. Strange lights in the sky and graves disturbed from within, details entirely absent from original accounts. Perhaps most remarkable was the village's posthumous population boom. What began as a modest settlement of approximately 30 inhabitants in early tellings inexplicably swelled to an impossible 2,000 residents in later accounts, a statistical impossibility for a remote Arctic settlement of that era. The story itself seemed alive, growing and evolving with each new writer who encountered it. This evolution speaks to something fundamental in human psychology. Remote disappearances captivate our imagination because they tap into our inherent fear of isolation and the unknown. The vast, empty wilderness of the Canadian Arctic provides the perfect backdrop for these anxieties, a place where people can seemingly vanish without explanation, leaving behind only questions. As the legend grew, so did the theories: natural disaster, tribal migration, supernatural intervention, or elaborate hoax. Each explanation tried to make sense of the inexplicable, reflecting our deep-seated need to impose order on chaos, to find patterns in coincidence. Today, the Anjikuni legend lives on not just as a mystery, but as a cultural touchstone. What's particularly fascinating is how modern Inuit communities approach this story, with a blend of respect for traditional storytelling while acknowledging its evolution through decades of retelling. They recognize the embellishments that have transformed a possible historical event into something more mythical. Perhaps this is why such mysteries endure. They exist in that perfect space between reality and imagination. In our quest to map, document, and explain every corner of our world, stories like Anjikuni remind us of our limitations. They humble us. When we step back from the sensationalism, we're left not with disappointment that there's no perfect answer, but with something more valuable: a window into how human cultures process the unknown. The village that vanished remains powerful, not because it might have been alien abduction or a supernatural phenomenon, but because it shows us how readily we transform historical incidents into legends that reflect our deepest uncertainties about what lurks beyond our understanding. Some mysteries don't leave clues, they leave echoes. Follow for the ones they don't want you to remember. If this vanished village chilled you, wait until you hear what disappeared in the Andes. Hit follow before the next echo fades. Follow Dark Echoes series, because the scariest stories are the ones that never end.